listening to Cody Lundin's Keep Your Ass Alive, where Cody teaches real people real skills, giving raw, hard survival advice with a hug. And now, broadcasting from somewhere in a high desert wilderness, here's Cody.
Hey, welcome to another episode of Keep Your Ass Alive. I'm your host, Cody Lundin, and I have a very special guest, Tony Brown. And what we're going to do with Tony, the reason I asked Tony to be here around our crackling campfire, we're going to have a campfire talk, is Tony's literally a master of sustainable design. I would call him an icon. He might smirk or roll his eyes at that, but I wouldn't. He's been doing this for a long time. Well, this is a survival show, so why in the hell am I having some guy talk about sustainable design? Well, if something is not sustainable, that means there's an endpoint, and that endpoint in the field could be death, right? So we're all living one way or another in a shelter. Even if you're in your van listening to this podcast in a parking lot, you're still in a shelter. So what Tony's a master at is taking shelters and making them sustainable within the bioregion they're sitting at. And what that means, and we'll talk to him about that, is you're going to last longer. In plain terms, right? If something is sustainable, it means it's going to last longer and have an enduring quality. This is a survival show. We're talking about sustainable design because it matters. It matters to long-term and sometimes short-term survival. So, Tony, welcome to Keep Your Ass Alive.
Well, thank you.
So, you've been an architect for a long, long time.
Yes.
I want to know what your passion was to get into architecture and how long you've been doing it.
Well, it's a long story. Well, I grew up in London, so obviously I was surrounded by a lot of incredible buildings, all the way from, the Tower of London to the Shard, the new buildings. And that sort of seeped into my consciousness, not purposefully, but just by being there. And then my dad ran pubs, and I grew up in pubs, which was kind of a interesting experience. A lot of architects said the most difficult things to design are churches and pubs because they all have atmosphere.
Huh.
And so one of the ones I remember, which was really amazing, was a pub called the Duke of Grafton, and it was on a road called Euston Road. But it was a Victorian pub, so it had etched glass, it had stained glass skylights,
wow.
It had a mural on a mirror all the way around the bar that was like a mural of a river with herons and all sorts of creatures in it. And I was really young. I was just, still in school, and I had to come in through. But when everybody had left, it was so quiet down there. I'd go and I'd just look at all these pictures on the wall. So then I went into the Air Force because it was required. You had a 2-year requirement for national service. And then when I came out, I wasn't sure what I was going to do. But my father had a friend who was an architect, and so I went to work for him. And I really got to enjoy it because it's a combination of art, science, technology. It's actually a combination of everything if you think about it. And so for me, my brain is one that keeps jumping around from all sorts of things. It sort of was a kind of way of synthesizing ideas I had. So that was really the catalyst for me getting into architecture. And then, of course, I went to school and got a degree.
How long have you been an architect?
Well, my degree is in the 1950s, 53, I think it was, when I got my degree.
I was really stoned in math class. So what is that in years? You've been an architect
like
for 60 plus years then?
Yeah.
Damn.
Yeah, it's a long time.
So we both know, I'm not an architect, and you know that because you are, but I've known you for a long time. There's a lot of architects in town and elsewhere that design unsustainable crap.
Oh, yeah.
What got you into sustainable design?
Well, when I ended up coming to the US, I worked in Berkeley for some famous architects, and I got kind of frustrated because they, in my opinion, they're just making the slums of the future. And then I saw an exhibit in Berkeley Art Museum for an architect called Paolo Soleri, and he was designing these amazing three-dimensional cities. And it happened that they were offering workshops. So this was my epiphany moment. I sort of I got to go see what this is about. So I signed up for a workshop. That was 1971, I think it was.
And you saw it in Berkeley, but was it an ad in Berkeley and he was in Arizona with the workshop, or was he in Berkeley?
No, he was in Berkeley for this big exhibit where it had these incredible models of urban design. And so I signed up for the workshop, ended up coming to Arizona, which is how I got here. And it was just amazing. We talked about sustainability all the time, about why cities aren't working, why we needed a totally different model for urban design, how we could solve sprawl, land use, water use, food systems. And we discussed this, on this construction site, because it was also a construction site where they were trying to build an ecology, which is a combination of architecture and ecology.
Arcology.
Yeah. And so the place that I went to was called Arcosanti. And it was an attempt to build a prototype of this big idea about three-dimensional cities. And so I was there for 6 weeks. I got there, and he said, "Oh, you're an architect, build this." And I'd never built anything in my life. And so I ended up figuring out how to build this roof on an octagonal structure. And I really felt like there was a sense of purpose being there. Whereas in all the architecture offices I'd worked in, it was just like, how can we make more money? How can we get more projects? It wasn't anything about why are we doing this. It's always about how. And I thought, wow, we need to start talking about why we're doing all this stuff. So anyway, I was so enthused about being there that I went back to Berkeley and then wrote and said, "Hey, I'd like to come out and be permanent there and help you build this thing."
Wow.
So eventually they said yes, because I had a wife and a child at the time. And it wasn't really set up. It was more a construction site than anything else. But anyway, I came back in 1972 and then ended up staying there for 13 years, which was way longer than I'd ever planned staying anywhere.
Wow.
So we had to teach people every 6 weeks who came in how to build these giant concrete structures.
Now, what do you mean by that? Every 6 weeks? Was there little tribes of students that would come in on a rotating basis then?
Yeah. Every 6 weeks there'd be a new cohort coming in.
Now the 70s that's when this stuff was hip.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Everyone's, solar and whatever. So we'll talk about later about what's quote unquote hip now, but what was it like then with that particular green movement? Was there a high level of passion from the general public to get back to the land and do something sustainable? Yeah,
because the 70s were really a time when, Earth Day started. Everybody was really conscious about the whole idea of sustainability, recycling, all this kind of stuff. And
what the hell happened?
Yeah, that's what I keep asking myself.
So every 6 weeks, a new tribe would come in.
Yeah.
And Arcosanti is still there, by the way, in the same location where you helped build it, right?
Yeah.
And then what happened with, because 13 years is a long time there.
Yeah, well, I'd taken a year off from construction to do the idea of making Arcosanti a art center. And so I'd been working on that for a year. Solari had said, yes, that's fine. That's a good idea. And then after a year and a half, we had a meeting about what I was doing and how I was trying to do this. And then he said, well, I don't want you to do this anymore. And so I said, okay, well, why is that? And he said, because you might be too successful. And I thought, what the hell? That's crazy. What he meant was it was going to take energy away from the construction by bringing arts into the community there. And my argument was, no, it's not. It's going to actually bring more energy. It's going to be, bring publicity. It's going to bring people. But he was adamant, so I said, okay. And then 6 weeks later, we were gone.
Wow. Wow.
So we moved to Prescott because Prescott was the closest town, and we were totally broke. It wasn't a paying. Well, it was paid a little bit minimum wage, I think it was. And so anyway, I knocked around in Prescott for a while, trying to figure out what to do. And I always had this idea of getting into education because at Arcosanti I'd been teaching people how to pour concrete, how to build forms, how to do all this stuff, but also getting involved in Solari's philosophy because he was a philosopher as well as an architect. And so I did a whole bunch of things. I wrote for a magazine for a while until it folded. And I did some illustrations. I got jobs doing illustrations. And then I finally decided with the art director of the magazine that folded that we'd start up a graphic design company. So then I did that. And then I built the whole thing up because my partner bailed after a year. So I was left with that. So then I built it up. We got the hospital as a client. We got Prescott College as a client. And that allowed me some room to be able to try something new. So I went to Prescott College and I said, look, I'm into this sustainability stuff. I'd like to design a class to teach students sustainable design. And it took them a year of debate. And do we want to do this or not? Maybe not. So finally they did. I had a friend who was also an architect, a woman called Patty Olson. And so we together taught the first class. And then we built it up to 5 classes, which was great. It covered a whole bigger range of subjects, including urban design. Then Prescott College went through a financial crisis, and they came to me and said, okay, we're canceling the sustainability class S. So I thought, screw it, I'll start my own school. If they're not going to be smart enough to know this is an important subject, I'll start my own school and we can teach whatever we want. So I started a school called Ecosa Institute, and put a board together, and we talked about how to raise money, how to do a whole bunch of publicity and all that stuff. And then one day, one of our board members said, I think we've talked enough. Why don't you just put out a website and see what happens? So we did that. And for the first semester in 2000, we got 8 students, and you were there. No, we got more than that. We got 11 students. And we did that first semester at Arcosanti. Even though I've left, I didn't burn any bridges. So, we still had a relationship.
I remember that class.
Yeah. So that's where it started. And then we've been running semester classes for pretty much the last 18 years. And then I got involved with becoming part of Prescott College. which seemed like a good idea at the time. So I became an adjunct professor at Prescott College. As part of the deal, the money we had went into Prescott College, plus 65 acres of land in the Granite Dells went into Prescott College. As it turned out, fortunately, we had a very tight agreement with Prescott College, and that agreement had an escape clause. So first semester at Prescott College was great, 16 weeks, great students. Second semester was great, bunch of students, but then COVID hit in the middle of it. And they said, no, we're not going to allow you to do 16-week programs anymore. You have to do these 4-week blocks. And to be honest, 4-week blocks to understand a subject like sustainable design is just not enough.
Yeah. You're on your own again now, and Ecosa's based in Denver then.
Yeah, we're on our own. So I'm getting up there in years, so I can't be as energetic as I was in the beginning. And so I have this amazing woman called Cynthia Fishman. She was an alumni in 2017, I think it was, or maybe before. And she's got so much energy. She's passionate about the program. She's really, she's worked for free over the last 3 or 4 months. We've got a board together that's a dynamite board. We're planning on starting again next year with the semester programs.
Yeah, and I want to talk to you more about Ecosa. This podcast, Keep Your Ass Alive, is about all things self-reliant. Mm-hmm. You agreed to be here because of sustainable design. Mm-hmm. In the context of self-reliance/survival, because they can be a hair's width away, why is sustainable design important?
Well, if you want to look at the big picture, we're just killing ourselves as a species. I mean, we're destroying the land. We've got climate changes going on. We're still pumping massive amount of carbon dioxide into the air. We're doing these things with agricultural farming that's destroying waterways. If you go through the whole list, it's just incredibly stupid.
Why do you think we keep crapping where we sleep?
Lack of education, I think, is one thing. Politicians that use it as a lever to maintain power. It's a very complex subject. There's lots of reasons why these things happen, but generally, I think if you look at the polling, the majority of Americans are worried about climate change, for example, but they don't know what to do about it. Mm-hmm. They have no knowledge to say, you can do this. And then what happens is everybody says, oh, recycle, don't waste water, don't do these things, but it's really the corporations telling you to do that, so they can't take responsibility. They're putting the responsibility on the individual instead of themselves. It's a great way of saying it's not our fault.
Absolving responsibility.
Yeah.
Now, for those that don't know, Tony and a gentleman named Rob Israel, a long time ago, what was that? When did Ecosa start? Late 90s, mid 90s?
It was 1996 when we got a nonprofit.
1996. Tony and Rob brought me into an office and we talked about, similar to a college program called orientation at a college that's in town, where they take the students out for a few weeks in the backcountry. And you wanted me to essentially to thump design students, to take them out for 3 days, so that in a survival situation per se, with limited gear, so they would understand the true dynamics of what is needed as opposed to what is wanted.
Right.
And we did that for many, many, many years. So I've known Tony for many years and taken out many, many, many Ecosa students into the field. And I have a high respect for you, and it's a real privilege to have you here, because you've never caved. Right. You've held to your vision. You've held on to it. You've just told us 2 or 3 or 4 failures. most people will go, screw this. I'm going to go back and work at the big box store. Not you.
Mm-hmm.
So I respect you highly for starting out with something that was a trend or phase or whatever you want to call it in the 70s and is sure not now. Because it's like swimming upstream to get people to understand sustainability is important.
Absolutely.
All indigenous peoples knew that sustainability was important or they died. So right off the bat, I want to say thank you and hundreds of other students and the information hopefully they'll get out in this podcast for being you and not folding and always swimming upstream and never giving up.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, because, thank you, because that's too rare nowadays. Now, regarding energy efficiency and sustainability, when I used to talk to Ecosa students, I make money as a professional survival instructor. And I had this thing back in my head a long time ago that money was evil, and it certainly can be used for that. But if I don't make a living doing what I'm doing, then I will be working at the big box store or whatever. So as much as it horrified some Ecosa students, I would always say, look, you need to make money doing your passion, or the passion is a hobby. It won't be a profession. And one of the things I like to tell Ecosa students, and unfortunately, it's people associate value with how much money am I saving? So regarding energy efficiency and sustainability, for all you out there that might be going, what in the hell are we talking about sustainable design for? We're going to try to save you money if you don't care about living longer through sustainable design. And that's what it'll do. So regarding energy efficiency and sustainability in that context, what are the biggest mistakes that architects make designing a home?
Orientation. If you go to any subdivision, I will guarantee you that they're lined up in all sorts of directions. Well, if you want to have a building be energy efficient, you need to be aware of where the sun is. So you really need buildings to be basically, if you look at it simplistically, a rectangle with the long side being east-west. Because then the south side is access to solar energy. And because the sun moves the way it does, you can actually control when that sun comes in and when it doesn't come in.
And that's called passive solar design,
Passive
correct?
solar design, yeah. So most designers, particularly developers, if they're housing developers, they don't do that, because they want everything to be in different orientations. So they actually, those houses are not initially able to take advantage of the sun. They just have to put in energy to make it work.
So they have to be on the grid. The sun is free energy.
Yep,
Essentially.
Absolutely.
So they're ignoring orientation, ignoring that free energy.
Right.
And we could talk about I don't know how deeply we get into passive solar design, but if you don't get what he just said, if you know how to orient your house in the right direction, assuming you're a new builder, it'll save you money. Again, I'm pulling things back to because that's what people seem to respond to nowadays.
Yeah.
Money, money, money. And a self-reliant home could potentially save your life and a hell of a lot of money over the years.
Yep.
So orientation, how much energy does the United States of America use to maintain room temperature?
Well, 75% of America's electricity goes into houses. So just maintaining houses with appliances, lighting, some heating, cooking, all those kind of things. So 75%.
You're kidding. Of the entire grid budget goes into running a home. Because that home probably sucks as far as self-reliance.
Yeah, because in the 50s we built homes as cheaply as we could, and insulation wasn't an issue because energy was abundant and cheap, and you could just pump as much energy as you wanted into a house. So all that old housing stock from the 1950s, maybe some of the 60s, well, probably the 60s too, and even 70s, are not designed to be well insulated, to be able to use the solar energy. They're just heat sucks, basically.
Right. Now, it takes a lot of money to knock something down and build something back up again.
Yeah.
What's your opinion? If someone has one of those homes, what's the cheapest, easiest thing they can do to try to regulate room temperature and use less grid power as far as thermoregulation and heating and cooling?
Right. Well, the simplest thing you can possibly do is to caulk every gap around windows, around doors, around electric boxes. That stops the infiltration of outside air coming in. It's not, it's not a solution to the whole thing, but then going in and re-insulating all the attics, the walls, so on.
So R factor in insulation, does the R mean resistance to airflow? Is that what it means?
Resistance to heat.
Resistance to heat. So caulk the windows, whatever, get rid of the gaps, and then add insulation are probably the easiest and / cheapest ways that someone can retrofit a home to use less grid power.
Right.
Anything else?
Well, obviously, if you put in solar panels and produce your own electricity, that's going to...
What do you think about single pane windows suck, correct?
Oh, yeah. If you can afford it, replacing windows. The problem is a lot of the early houses are sort of beginning to dilapidate, and so they tend to be owned by people with less money. And so it's harder to get those people to spend that kind of money.
Sure.
But generally, if you can put in new windows, there are some programs, I believe, where you can get new windows at cost or low if you're in a low income bracket. But that's a really good way of doing it. Windows are basically a big hole in the wall. I mean, they have no value in terms of resisting heat.
Is it like R2 or something for a double pane window?
For a double pane, it's probably more like an R3 or 4. A triple pane window is the best you can get, and that's not really very high. It's equivalent to an R5, I think, something like that. If you're going to get into that, it gets a little tricky because the window industry uses a metric that's different to R values. They use a thing which is a reciprocal of R values called U values. And I think the reason they did that is because it looks better on their brochures, because the lower the number, the better the window.
Got it.
So if you have a high U value, it means your window sucks, basically.
But it looks good to the people that don't understand the innuendo. Through the Ecosa Institute, because I've been a student in that too, not taking the classes at the Ecosa Institute, but learning from the students' projects, et cetera, and helping and teaching and learning from them in the field. Ecosa tries to take design and nature and make them as one. Why is it important for sustainable design to pay attention to nature? Well,
apart from our own survival, it's really interesting that since the 1970s, more and more research has been done on humans and nature and what nature does to us. Nature has a huge psychological impact on humans. There's now studies showing if you walk in the woods for an hour, your blood pressure goes down, stress hormones dissipate. Trees are putting what's called terpenes into the air, which affect your well-being. So just from walking in a wood, you can get a feeling of much more psychological peace. There's a study done by a guy called Ulrich, which was done in the, I believe, 1970s, where he used a hospital where they were doing the same surgeries on one wing. It was, I can't remember what it was, like spleen or something like that. And they did studies where the rooms that looked out on nature and there were rooms that looked out on a brick wall. And they discovered that the people with a view of nature healed faster, required less medicine, and were actually discharged early.
Wow.
So
what year? Was it the 70s?
70, I can't remember exactly. I should have looked this all up before.
No, it's fine, but we've known about this for decades.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And, architects that specialize in hospitals, not all of them, but some of them are aware of this and are beginning to bring this knowledge into their design work. But, if you live in an apartment and all you look out on is brick walls or roofs, it can be really depressing.
Yeah.
And I think, that we have a problem. We have a psychology problem. We have depression. We have suicide. It's all getting bigger. And I think a lot of that is because of the conditions that we live in. And in fact, it's been also another study showed that if you have green space in your neighborhood, crime goes down, school scores go up.
For those that don't know, what's green space mean?
Green space is, even if it's a mini park with some trees and a bench to sit on, or even verges that have been planted so that they're green with plants. We evolved in an environment of plants. Sometimes we forget that, but our brain is wired to be comfortable in that kind of environment. So we've forgotten about that, and so we've just really thrown that out as a factor in human health. And
as far as designing with nature, psychology is huge in survival as well. There's got to be some thermoregulatory benefits of understanding what bioregion that house is sitting in, as far as orientation, which hemisphere, thermal mass, insulation. If you're in Minnesota, as opposed to Florida, what are to me, like the big three were: one, you said orientation, which way is your house facing? Because my homestead's off grid. The other is insulation. Get as much as you can afford because it keeps the cocoa hot and the Kool-Aid cold. Right. And the other is thermal mass, if we're doing passive solar, to absorb that solar radiation, to re-radiate out. Are those the big three, or would you add something to that for someone who's really interested in designing something that's sustainable for their bioregion?
Yeah. Well, look at it this way. So power goes out. You have no way of cooking. So you can go out into your backyard and you can build a fire. You can cook your food over that. So the water system collapses. What are you going to do? Well, hopefully you have tanks that you've put into your house that collect rainwater from the roof that you can use for a garden, or you can use for drinking water if that happens. But the most important thing that I think a lot of people don't understand, you have to know how to grow food, because if the food supply disappears, what are you going to do? If you're living in New York in an apartment, there's no food. What are you going to do? How are you going to survive? And, unless you know at least the basics, like how do you grow a vegetable garden, for example, obviously you're not going to be able to grow wheat and oats and stuff, but you can at least survive on enough food to keep you going. And of course, if you have water tanks, then you have water to actually water your garden. That's necessary only in a dry climate like Arizona, but if you're living somewhere like Portland, you don't need the water because it comes out of the sky. Although a friend of mine in Tucson, Brad Lancaster, is amazing. He survives totally on water that comes out of the sky, and they have 10 inches a year, and he manages to collect enough to survive in Tucson, in the middle of the city, and to grow food.
That's an accomplishment, isn't it?
Yeah, it's amazing.
Do you know what his square footage is of collection and how many tanks he has, the gallon capacity he has?
He has about 1,000 gallons in a concrete septic tank. And then he has another whole tank he lives in a converted garage, actually, and it's a smaller tank, but it's enough for him to survive on.
But with the gardening too?
Yeah, the septic tank water thing is for the garden.
Got basically. It. And one of my questions for you is, was the homeowner making their home self-reliant? You talked about water tanks, rain catchment, whatever. If someone listening to this podcast is on the grid, which most of them will be, right? We don't have the luxury of going off on 40 acres and having sheep and whatever else we might have. Mm-hmm. What can, barring building codes and HOA agreements and all the other rules that get thrown in the way, what are some of the things someone can do to make their home more self-reliant? You said maybe water tanks with roof catchment. You've mentioned photovoltaic panels, which could be probably grid tie-in, mm-hmm. right, with maybe a separate battery bank for if the grid was gone. We've mentioned caulking around windows, any big spaces. We've mentioned maybe adding some insulation, replacing windows if they're single pane, if we have the money to double pane. Mm-hmm. What else can a conventional homeowner do to make their home more resilient in a time of change, to make it more self-reliant?
Okay. I'm going to change the subject a little bit. So we have evolved Ecosa from sustainability to regenerative. In other words, we're trying now to look at how can we make regenerative design. And what regenerative design is, it's about how do you create a design that's going to evolve, that's going to continue to grow and continue to change.
Based on what factors?
Based on, several factors. For example, sustainability is really great, but it's only, I think, the beginning. Sustainability is about sustaining what we have. Regenerative is about how do you take what we have and make it richer and make it more productive, make it more, I don't know what else, but make it more of what it is. And that relies on a thing called community. So if you want to be self-reliant, say, in a city or in a town, I don't know if you could do this in a city, you need to have a community that can work together. For example, if I grow tons of tomatoes, my friend across the street is growing tons of cucumbers, and my friend a block away is growing eggplants. We get together, we exchange them. I've got so many of these, you want some of these, you want some of that. So we, instead of relying on an agricultural technology, we are, and supply chain that comes from China or India or Mexico or wherever, we create systems within our own communities. So collectively, we become regenerative. We regenerate our own agriculture. We have skills in one neighborhood, if you went and cataloged them all, that are just amazing. We've got plumbers, we've got computer programmers, we've got all these people, but we never connect. We're always in our own single-family houses and so on. So how does design work to improve that? Well, creating public spaces and creating community spaces where people can gather and exchange ideas, exchange food, like this farmer's market idea. But you could extend it to be exchanging tools, exchanging skills. You could have it exchanging all sorts of things.
So it sounds tribal, like that's been done for tens of thousands of years.
That's how we used to do it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
We used to do it that way. And that instead of having to hire someone to do childcare, the older people in the tribe would look after the kids. Now you stick them all into separate categories. The old people go into these, what they call 55 plus communities, no kids. Kids go into, some other school. So what we're doing is we're actually segregating our society, one by wealth, two by color, basically. I mean, we're still doing that. And three, we're doing it by age. We're segregating people by age, which is a tragedy because kids and old people get on really well. Pam, my wife, she used to take her students in 5th grade to the VA, and they would sit for a whole hour with veterans, and they got on like a house on fire.
Wow.
So the kids learned about what the veterans were, and the veterans were all energized by, the kids. And we've basically eliminated that from our society, which is insane. So there is there's a movement called co-housing, which is sort of based on that idea that if you can build a community that has multiple ages, that, when the parents go out to work, the older people that are retired could look after the kids. And you have a public space in the center where everybody communicates and gets to know each other. And so building those physical structures can help make a community work much, much better than it has been.
It's funny that everything you're talking about, from traveling and going and, seeing tribal people, it's like you said, it's what we've been doing. Mm-hmm. And we've gotten away from that.
Yeah.
So it's what we've been doing for thousands of years. And it's a bummer. We've got away from that so much.
And now it's even worse because we're all on our phones. And sometimes it drives me nuts. I walk around the square sometimes and everybody's on a freaking phone.
They're being social, Tony. They're on social media.
Yeah, right. Yep. That's true.
I have another. How could the United States or any place make energy efficient, sustainable design, whatever you want to call it, a normal practice supported by building codes? I know that's a massive question, and you said lack of education is part of the issue, but it's a pain in the ass to try to do alternative building things in a traditional building code. What's it going to take? How many rolls of toilet paper are we going to go through? Because we tend to react to something only after there's a crisis, which is not good survival training. Survival trainers mitigate pain. We don't wait till we're in pain and then try to deal with it.
Sure.
Do you have any ideas for softening up the building codes, for lack of a better word, to make what you're doing a more normal practice?
Yeah, alternative materials are always a problem to get accepted. Alternative materials are materials that try to be lower energy than standard materials. And the problem is not only regulation, but it's also the building industry. The building industry hates any kind of risk, quite rationally, actually, because they don't want to build with something they're not familiar with in case something happens that they don't understand. And the other aspect of any kind of new material is that because it's not vast quantities, it tends to be more expensive. So that's another barrier to using new materials and new techniques. I think the building departments are coming around to alternatives. The big issue is codes that are standard for everywhere. So you go to international building codes, and it gives you the same stuff whether you're living in Africa or Prescott.
So there's no thought of bioregion for where the building's going to be.
No, really.
Which negates everything we've been talking about, essentially.
Yeah, to a large degree.
So is one of the first problems just because as a survival instructor, I'm not going to tell someone in Bemidji, Minnesota, they're going to have a different survival strategy in the wintertime than someone in Tucson, Arizona in January.
Yeah.
So bioregional is key, especially with primitive living skills where you're choosing out wood to make a certain fire by friction. That seems like a big duh to me. Why in the hell are we not paying attention to the outdoor environment of where this box called a house goes still? Yeah. Why are we not paying attention to that?
We're not paying attention because we don't actually see nature anymore. The people that are making all these rules live in cities. They're not aware of the nuances of bioregionalism. They don't understand that building a house in Minnesota and building a house in Arizona are two totally different things, because we've come up with this standard model, stick frame, stucco, or wood siding, tiles for the roof, and then pump in energy. So why would we want to do anything different in Minnesota than we do in Arizona? If you look at it from a sustainable point of view, you'd probably use adobe in Arizona, especially in the desert areas, because it's a traditional material. It works really well in very hot, dry climates. In Minnesota, massive insulation would be what you want to do. So you maybe do double stud walls and put in massive amounts of insulation. So there's a whole different approach to architecture depending on which region you're living in. And, what we've been doing is we've been hiring people from, East Coast, big architects to do buildings in Phoenix. And the prime example is the federal courthouse in Phoenix. It's like a greenhouse. And then they try and cool it, and they're using sustainable ways of cooling it, which is like misting the big interior spaces,
because it was built improperly to begin with.
Yeah, because the guy didn't understand the climate.
He's in the desert. Yeah. Unfortunately, I've been in that building and felt the ramifications of that poor design.
Yeah.
So, from a grid down survival aspect, because you know what I do, I love survival skills, meaning the home is now without power. In your opinion, what are the most vulnerable aspects of a home in a grid down situation? Maybe it's an obvious question, but very rarely do we have a chance to ask an architect who's been involved in sustainable regenerative design for decades. Grid down, what's going to hurt the most to the occupants?
Well, it depends what your energy system is, one. So if you've got a gas stove, it's probably got electronic ignition system. You can probably still heat and cook with that. Electric stove, you're done. You can't cook anything. You can't boil water, can't do any of that. But vulnerability is... say the power goes out in Phoenix for 3 days. It's 110 outside. If your building is not insulated, you're going to cook, basically. And the big issue in Phoenix is the temperature going down enough at night to be able to cool off your building at nighttime. Because then you could open your windows at night, let the cooler air come in, close them in the day, keep that cool in if you've got some mass in your building.
Well, there's so much thermal mass in the city, they're losing that, aren't they?
Yeah.
It's not really cooling down at night anymore.
Yeah, that's the big issue. And it's something, again, it's like taking a mallet and hitting yourself on the head. Let's get rid of nature put in a parking lot and increase the temperature like 20 degrees. And, you know, Phoenix is basically like a pancake. So it's just basically a giant solar collector. And then we pump in masses of energy to try and cool the whole thing off.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It is. It's self-defeating. It's just not making any sense anymore. But so I think, you know, it depends a bit on your climate. I mean, if it's in Minnesota,
sure,
your heat goes away, grid goes down, you're going to freeze. So again, unless your house is designed for that climate, you're going to be at risk.
So thermoregulation, water, essentially later on food, you know, we know the dangers of that. Most homes are notoriously on grid. Now, here's a fun question. I can't wait to hear what you'll say about it. If you were to design a house to survive a zombie apocalypse, and I know there's variables in zombies,
Yeah.
at least they're all dead. We have that. How would you design a house to survive the zombie apocalypse? And we're assuming they're the traditional zombies. They can run fast or just waddle slow, but they're not like in a climb up. You're just like the zombies that are historically on TV. How would you do that?
Well, it depends how long the apocalypse is happening. So if it's a fairly short apocalypse, it wouldn't be too hard. You just need well-reinforced windows and doors, because I believe zombies pile up and smash in windows. Right? But if it goes on for a very long time, you probably need to build in some kind of weapons to mow down the zombies. You need somewhere to get out of the house, underground, come up somewhere else.
Without them knowing about it. Some like maybe like in the base of a bush or something like that.
Yeah.
Hogan's Hero style or whatever, the tree stump that comes up.
Yeah. Because, I mean, obviously, eventually your supplies are going to run out, and so you'd have to be able to get out to scavenge for supplies. You know, I'm of the opinion that people that are going into survival shelters are nuts, because if there's an atomic bomb apocalypse, you come out, there's nothing here. What are you going to do? You have no food, you have no water, it's all radioactive. It's like, and so, you know, a zombie apocalypse, if it were to happen, I don't know if there is any scientific evidence that the zombies are, well, there are actually zombie caterpillars and zombie ants as well.
Really?
Yeah. There's a fungus that goes into them and then controls how they operate.
You're kidding.
No. So, and anyway, so it's a possibility, but you know, I think once society is completely collapsed, the only way to survive is in small groups, with as many different skills as you can possibly get together. So all your students would be pretty well situated, because they could just head out into the wilderness and survive.
They have that skill plus what they came to the table with.
Yeah.
So a couple different skill sets.
Yeah.
Going back to the tribe.
Yeah.
So
I mean, we've got to acknowledge that we are a tribal culture, and I think that's part of the problem is when we say, "Oh no, everybody's the same." It's not true. We do have different cultures. It doesn't mean that we have to fight each other. It just means if we acknowledge that we are a tribal culture, how do we bridge the gaps between those tribes? You know, and of course, native cultures knew how to do that. All the tribes would come together to do a powwow, for example, in Arizona, so that you know, you get to know the other is not the enemy, And I'm afraid we're in a situation where we see the other as the enemy, not as a different, valid tribe that we could communicate with.
Amen. God. I have a couple more questions for you. There's a lot of greenwash out there, as you know. Are there any new products regarding alternative energy that you think are worthwhile talking about on this podcast?
Well, it depends whether you mean centralized energy or distributed energy. Distributed energy is much more resilient. Centralized energy is vulnerable to attack, if you want. The utilities want centralized energy because they can control it and they can charge you for it. That's why it's difficult sometimes to get permits to put on solar panels on your houses. But a distributed system, for example, would be like a whole neighborhood with solar panels connected to a mini grid. So one person's panels go out, it doesn't affect the whole grid. It can actually draw energy from the whole grid until they get repaired. So having that small scale is much more resilient. And if you look at nature and evolution, you can see that diversity is a real survival skill. Diversity means that if one thing fails, something else can take its place. Yeah.
Well, how about, since I know people that probably would listen to this are more kind of at least off the grid in their head, something individualized. And we have the photovoltaics, they're archival, they've been around a long time. And I just didn't know, I know you can get the batteries and the solar panels where you can have your own little thing going for, at least electrical power. I didn't know if there was any new gadgets or gizmos out there that you thought were worth a damn as far as people taking back their power, whether it's something new about water collection or electrical energy or anything, because you've had your pulse on this for several decades.
Yeah.
Or should we just stick to the standards at this point in time that a lot of us know about with a few Google searches, photovoltaics, etc.?
Yeah, well, there are some things that people are researching, and there's some breakthroughs, for example, in battery storage that could mean that, you could collect enough energy and store it for like a whole year.
Wow.
So there's battery technology is really booming right now because of electric vehicles and also because the grid is gradually turning to sustainables, and that means that they're not constant in terms of their generation. So like photovoltaic doesn't actually create energy during the night, although there are some new panels that will actually create energy from moonlight.
You're kidding me. How new are those panels?
Huh?
How new are those panels?
Oh, they're really new. I don't even think they're on the market yet.
Wow.
I mean, it's a research project in a laboratory. So there's that. There's things like windows that will actually create electricity.
Wow.
The glass is also a photovoltaic. So you could have a whole glass wall which would produce all the electricity you needed. So there's research is ongoing. The big challenge for all this research is how do you scale it and get it into the market at a price people can actually afford. And so that's for me is one of the big challenges for anybody looking at new forms of energy. And of course, nuclear is coming back, which in my day and age was like, something everybody was protesting against. But apparently these new mini nuclear plants are much safer. So you could have mini neighborhood nuclear plants. But they're more to neighborhood scale or larger scale. And the reason they're coming online is because of all the AI stuff, all these new gigantic computer places that are being built to house all the equipment for the internet and AI. They suck out vast amounts of water, vast amounts of energy. So now they're looking at using atomic energy to produce all their electricity.
Wow.
And so Google, I believe, is using nuclear energy, and I think Microsoft is too.
How can people find out more about the Ecosa Institute if they wanted to check out a class or at least look and see what they're about?
It's simple. Our website is ecosa.org, so ECOSA. And it's got a lot of information on that as to what we teach and why we're teaching it. We're offering a 16-week program, but we will be offering shorter programs in the summer next year. The center itself is moving to Denver, so it will be in Colorado. But we are actually planning on the first 2 weeks being here in Arizona.
So you will still train here in Arizona?
Yeah, and you'll train with Cody Lundin, so that's a big reason to come.
Big reason to come. So ecosa.org.
Yeah.
Right? So I want to do one more thing. On this show, we do a segment called Make Tony Twitter. And we have two Tonys here, but that's the Tony I want to focus on now. And what I have here is this invisible magic joke book that's bound to be funny because it says funny jokes. And sometimes you can judge a book by its cover, hopefully. So what I want this Tony to do is write down on this piece of paper how many jokes with this pen, just a number, how many jokes do you think I'm going to need to tell that Tony to make him titter? Don't tell him, just write down a number. Now these are quality jokes in this book. It says funny jokes. Okay, so Tony, guess Tony. Tony Brown has a number.
Okay.
Tony, are you ready to titter?
I am ready.
Okay. So what I'm going to do, the viewing audience at home, you can guess just like Tony Brown did. I'm going to randomly take this funny joke book and open it up and read Tony a joke. And we got a number here from Tony Brown. So here we go. Let's see how many jokes it takes.
Make it good.
It'll be good. Cow, what did the vet say about your rash? Pig, just gave me some ointment and I feel better already.
No,
Okay, that's
sorry.
not going to work.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me find another one.
Mildly funny, but not, yeah.
Sports reporter, what do you get if your receivers don't lift weights during Monday or Friday practices? Football coach, weekends. Week, like...
Yeah.
Not,
I get it.
Yeah, but not funny. Okay, I got
Not
it.
funny.
Moving on. Chester, what are you doing? Lester, I'm making a long-distance call to myself. Chester, won't that cost a lot of money? Lester, nope, I'm calling collect. Oh, okay. Did that count or not? No.
No.
Okay, let's do it again here. Patient, I'm not feeling well and I'm really concerned. Doctor, don't worry, I've had the same illness myself. Patient, yeah, but you didn't have the same doctor.
Okay, that was pretty good.
We got him.
And the last one, I was laughing at your failure, so that doesn't count.
So what was that, 4?
4.
So Tony was guessing 5. So he was
not
close.
bad, Tony. Not
close
bad.
on
All
that.
right.
So that's make Tony titter. We'll put that away. The reason Tony Brown is on this show is sustainability, regenerative design will keep us alive longer. Keep Your Ass Alive is a show about self-reliance and doing more with less. When you can have a structure or a building that works in harmony with nature, you are doing more with less because nature is that big battery we can all draw from, not just for our psychological health, but, free energy, free power from the sun, catching rain. It's not a bunch of hippie BS. If you want to live longer, you're all living in a home, most of you, make it as self-reliant as possible. It's important. Tony, it's a real privilege to have you. I really respect you as a person and following your heart all this time and teaching the thousands of students that I know you've taught. Thank you for being on the show.
You're welcome. It was great being here.
Awesome. So that's it for this episode of Keep Your Ass Alive. You can give us a comment, or if you have a question we may answer on the show, you can email us at keepyourassalive@gmail.com. Stay safe. See you next time. Hey campers, so that's it for this episode of Keep Your Ass Alive. Tune in next time and we'll talk to people just like you about survival advice or whatever floats your boat. Want to watch the only survival show on Earth, created, hosted, and produced by a real survival instructor? Check out The Survival Show with Cody Lundin at thesurvivalshow.com. Want to take your learning to the next level? Please visit my Aboriginal Living Skills School at www.codylundin.com. We offer field courses in modern outdoor survival, primitive living skills, or urban preparedness to enhance your self-reliance, confidence, and safety in the city or the wilderness.
Visit www.codylundin.com today.